Jazz Club. Really flying the music. Okay.
Greetings and salutations. Hey everyone. Happy Monday. Is Monday? Is it Monday or Thursday? It's hard to tell anymore with our schedule of constantly making it happen as we go on our own. And what does that mean on a regular basis? I have no idea what day it is, but what keeps me kind of tethered a little bit to the calendar is coming back and doing some story time with you in the form of the death of Cliff Huxtable. And it's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be back after the weekend to come and share chapter 4, Sondra, with you all tonight. It's been a rough few days. It's also been a hopeful last few days, hopeful, and that we've seen a lot of people out demonstrating and protesting, marching on behalf of freedom and justice, equality, life, marching on behalf of life. And so thank you to all those people out there. Just giving your voice on behalf of all of us. And I want to thank everyone too for watching and sharing Smoke Signals. I decided to separate it out from last week's episode of this series and just let it have a standalone moment because I want it to be heard. I wanted it to be communicated without mistake, without question, that there's work for all of us to do. And there's no actual need to make any one of us do more of the work that we can all share in doing. So thank you all for watching and sharing it. I think it's kind of coming up on 3,000 views right now, which is pretty crazy and awesome. And I do want to start tonight by just acknowledging, what we're seeing in the news a little bit before we get into our read. Some interesting things are happening. Some exciting things are happening. This police reform bill looks like it, is going to start to shape up and Congress is going to make some moves that are certainly long overdue. But, anytime action is taking place, then the time is right. So, we can all appreciate that. Show up in your activism authentically. I know, today there was a lot of bristling, myself included, at seeing Nancy Pelosi wearing kente cloth. I still have my feelings about it. I'm not going to go into a long diatribe about it tonight because I do want to get on with things. But, here's the thing. I will say this. I don't know her ethnicity. Pelosi, I have no idea what the background of that is. If it's let's say if she's Italian or Portuguese or Irish, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, I think I get the symbol of solidarity, but I would have loved to have seen her wear something that's a bit more closer to her own, origin, to really communicate that, globally, we are in this together. There is no shortage of people wearing kente cloth who have the mission and goal and desire for freedom and equality. There's no shortage of those people wearing kente cloth, right? Or, authentically that being a part of who they are. But if we can get people who are Irish wearing, things that are distinctly Irish, and Italians who are wearing things that are distinctly, and all the different ethnicities, if they're showing up, if you're using symbols, right? That is not just some performative sort of exercise. We see people painting streets and we see people kneeling, something that Colin Kaepernick, was ridiculed and shamed and berated and blacklisted for doing. All of a sudden today, we see it all over the place. People are kneeling all over the place. And I'm like, well, okay, your gesture or your act should be what you do in your workplace. And for Colin, it was kneeling during the national anthem. For the Congress people, perhaps it's actually just getting up off the floor and passing that bill and making these things happen, in their form. So usurping other symbols and other gestures. Okay. I don't know if it makes me feel any better about, the prospect of you doing your job. Now, after the bill passes, I will drape you in kente. After the bill passes, I will crip walk or whatever you want me to do with you. After the bill passes, I will take you to a field in Virginia in the middle of the night, hold you up myself and say, behold, the only thing greater than yourself if you need me to do that. But in the meantime, in between time, focus on getting this bill passed. We need to clean up our police. Essentially from ourselves. So let's focus on what needs to be done in that respect. All right. That's the end of my my mini rant for tonight. Maybe later there'll be something else that I'll get into, but for tonight, just want to say we love you, Sandra Bland, and all the people who have passed since, and we're going to make this right. We're going to make this right. All right. Tonight, we are going to be reading chapter 4, Sondra. But before we get to that, before my beloved Laura Burks change the graphic, I want to introduce you to the person behind all the switching around and all that. I want to shine a light on Laura Burks, and so I'm going to ask her to pull herself forward and say, "Hey, Laura."
Hi.
So this is the woman who, when you see people switching, the frame switching, and you see graphics come up, and we get a rotation of the guests. When you see the banner come up that says that, or we have other bells and whistles over here. What else we have? When we see this, the whole who's your next, all that. Laura's controlling that, and there is no person that I trust more with this exercise than Laura. She's proven to be a vital assistant to me. How you feeling over there, Laura?
Great. Excited, just because I know what's to come. So, and what's already happened. So just excited to be a part of the project.
Awesome. I'm gonna move the camera. Oh, you got it locked, so I can't do it. Oh, you see how she do me, y'all? I was gonna put her on the frame a little bit. I was gonna ask you. There you go. She got it. Laura.
Yes.
What's your favorite Huxtable? And which one are you most like?
My favorite Huxtable, I would probably say, I think I'm gonna have to go with Denise just because of her style, and then how her story spun into a different world, and I loved a different world. Whom I most like is probably, I'd say I'm probably a mixture of like Olivia and Rudy in a way, because I was the tomboy growing up, but then like I was the kid that was always like kind of in the adult conversations, but everybody loved it. So I'd say I'd probably both of them.
Awesome. You'll see Laura some more, y'all. I'm going to make her come out to Front Street. Look, I did give her a warning tonight, though, that I was going to put her on frame. So she went and put a little makeup on and everything. She was like, wait a minute. I said, no, Laura, I'm going to bring you out to the front and say, hey. And she was like, okay, wait a minute. And then she was gone. So now I see what's up. I hadn't seen the whole, but I just adore you and I appreciate you. Laura's one of my students also at Prairie View. She's this is fulfilling an internship for her, but you would never know it because she's handling it like a professional who at any time, anyone who is looking to hire people once she graduates, this young lady, I will vouch for her any day of the week. There you go. Yeah. All right, back to the back with you. We're gonna get this thing going. All right, so And I have 4 interns altogether, and I'm going to take some time to introduce all 4 of them to you. So today we spotlight Laura, and then in coming episodes, you'll meet Amarachi, Cameron, and JeJuan. All right, let's get on with it. Chapter 4, Sondra. The day falls into night. Strangers and family continue to drift in and out of the Huxtable house, offering their love and condolences to all of the present Huxtable family members, all but Denise, who has not made it back from the cemetery. Sondra might worry about this if this wasn't the regular sort of thing Denise liked to do. Sondra has always been the more responsible, more considerate of the 2 elder siblings. Despite her desire to be a bit more adventurous, Sondra would never be the wild, uninhibited one Denise excelled at being. Her version of wild and uninhibited came off stiff and staged.
I too wanted to be the one to fly off to the ends of the earth and see the world. But I never stepped off that ledge for that sort of thing. You see, my dad was the only one who thought my jokes were funny. He made me feel special that way. I could never shake the feeling, despite being the oldest, of feeling like an afterthought. I often felt like the child who didn't exist, the one without a childhood. I guess I spent my entire life as an adult, and being a child was lost on me.
Sitting in far-off corners and crying on the shoulders of her friends were not an option for Sondra. She had to be the Clair proxy, the second mother of the house, the grown one among the ones who will always be more impetuous and forever younger. No one reserved youth for Sondra. Standing on the front stoop of the family home, Sondra takes a rare moment for herself. She sits at the top step, leaving room for whoever wants to sit with her for a bit. No one does. No one comes. No one reaches for Sondra on the front stoop, crying hidden tears as not to make a fuss. More guests step up with a brief, "Oh, Sondra, I'm so sorry for your loss," as they continue into the house with warm jazz spilling out when the door cracks open. Sondra sits alone, and no one notices.
A raindrop falls out of the sky, and it lands on my right knee. And just then, a tear falls from my left eye. A sprinkle of tears fell upon me as my daddy's favorite song, John Coltrane's After the Rain, found open cracks in the doors, in the windows, and the walls of the house, serenading me on the front step. The delicate rain and the soft saxophone is proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Daddy is present with me. And I make room for him, and he make room for me.
The front door swings open as friends from Claire's book club make their way onto the porch, down the stairs, and to the street. Having paid their respects and set dates for the long overdue book discussion, Clair walks the ladies out. Once all the women clear the stoop, Clair notices her eldest.
Sitting in the rain. You'll catch cold. Come inside.
The rain will let up. It always does.
Did your sister say where she was going? Or if she was coming back here? Oh, and where is Rudy? I haven't seen her in a while either. Sondra, did you hear me ask you?
I heard you, Mother. I'm sorry, Mom. I need you to see that I'm hurting too. I need you to see me hurt first.
Sondra.
Mother, I need to be broken. Even if it's just for this one moment, I need to be broken. And I need to let someone else have the answers, or know where a sibling is, or try the case, or feed the husband, or raise the kids, or be perfect. I'm not you. I need to be broken.
Sondra, you don't have to be perfect, baby. We are not perfect. And it's in our imperfectness that we find grace. You are full of grace. You're graceful. You're not perfect. You give of your time and your care. Your father and I, we never forgot you. We never overlooked you, ever. I'm so sorry that you ever felt that way. That falls on my shoulders. It falls on your father's shoulders. But you should never, ever believe that we loved you any less. We loved you the longest.
I have never wanted to disappoint you. My whole life, I have worked to make sure that you didn't forget me. I fell behind Denise, the wild one, and Theo, the male one, and Vanessa, the smart one, and Rudy, the youngest one. And I thought that by being a lawyer, you would see me. That by marrying an aspiring doctor just like you, that you would see me. Met Elvin, and even Elvin, and all his chauvinistic views on women, overstepped me for your attention. You changed Elvin. And then the twins came along, and it's been about my family ever since. And Rudy became the attorney you thought I should have been. Elvin became the doctor Dad was most proud of. And then I became the law professor.
Continuing to grace people with your generosity and with your wisdom, you shape the lives, the character, the future of not only our own children, but the children of countless other families. That is your gift, Sondra. My dear child, my sweet, sweet first child. My eldest, you could never lose favor in my eyes. You cried in my arms when the house was silent with the echoes of solitude. You were my company when your father worked 24 and 36-hour rotations. You have always been my best friend. You, more than anyone else, prepared me to be the courtroom attorney that I became. For you were there, and you were the only one who would sit and let me practice my opening and my closing arguments. And let the record show that you have been the greatest and most important partner that this lawyer has ever had. You're an angel. You're my angel. My eldest love of many loves in that room. No one, and I mean no one, can replace you. Not ever. There was a night many years ago when you came home from Princeton. I remember you knocking at the door, and Cliff, in all of his excitement, hopped up, looked out the window, and yelled, "Who is it?"
Yeah, he did that nearly every time I came home and forgot my key.
Yes, well, he loved replaying that joke every time you came home. He loved it because every time you answered, you would giggle a girlish laugh and say, "Daddy!" He lived for that. Every time, he lived for it. You were Daddy's little girl, his first girl, and he lived for you.
Sondra regresses to 8 years old. She begins crying again. She falls into her mother's arms again. No one knew the girl Sondra was. No one asked about those days long past when she was the only one. No one thought she needed her childhood or the memory of being her mother's best friend. But in this moment, just as John Coltrane promised, after the rain, Sondra knew she was loved. Tonight we'll be discussing colorism in the media. Tonight's panel is entitled The Invisible Ones, Colorism in Media. And tonight our panelists are an array of scholars and thinkers and writers who will look at representation, especially among women, in mass media, whether it's television, film, print media, and the presence of the spectrum of Black women in media. There we go. So we have Red Summer on our panel. Red, you will remember Red from the episode entitled Denise, where she portrayed the role of Denise. She is making the most of her time in quarantine by acting in a series of online series, recording a podcast, and starting in a YouTube show. She's also the lead curator for a hip hop museum in DC, and is producing a short film, all while virtually teaching her high school students from her bedroom/office/studio. Awesome. Thank you so much, Red Summer. And we also have Kelly Macias, PhD. The Kelly is a writer and organizational consultant specializing in diversity, equity, and inclusion. She is a founding faculty member of the Adler University's Masters of Arts program in Media and Communication for Social Change, and is currently working on a book about how Black women have saved the internet. Tiffany Flowers is an activist, organizer, wife, breast cancer survivor. Yes, ma'am. Where's my triangle so I can ting that? She's a DJ, and in her full-time capacity serves as the Coalition and Partnerships Director of Democracy for All 2021. So we're looking to the future with this. Yes, a structural democracy reform campaign. Tiffany resides in Baltimore with the wretched Maryland, by way of New London, Connecticut. Aviva Dove-Avon, a friend and homie from Charlottesville, Virginia. She's an assistant professor of film and media studies at Arizona State University, a consulting editor, scholar writing. She's a consulting editor, scholar writing program for Miss Magazine, and a screenwriter. Her academic work explores the representation of gender and race in popular culture, especially television. Dr. Tammy L. Holmes, a colleague of mine at Prairie View A&M University. We teach in the same Department of Languages and Communication. She's a graduate from she's a graduate from 21 years. I think that's a typo on my part. My bad, sis. Teaching in the areas of communication, leadership, Africana studies, and adult learning. Currently, again, as I said, she is a colleague of mine at Prairie View. Her research focuses on study abroad and documentary filmmaking. And we have Dr. Stella Smith. Dr. Smith, she's been on our panel previously as well. She's the Associate Director of the Minority Achievement, Creativity, and High Ability Center, also known as the Mach 3 Center, within the Whitlow R. Green College of Education at Prairie View A&M University. Her research focuses on the experiences of faculty and administrators of color in higher education, African American females in leadership in higher ed, and access and inclusion of underserved populations in higher education. Dr. Smith earned her doctorate in educational administration from the University of Texas at Austin. Whew, a lot of people. And we're going to be rotating them around here during this panel because, with StreamYard, we got to do the Soul Train scramble board with our images here. But with the first batch of phenomenal women sitting here in front of me, thank you so much and welcome. And let's talk. Let's talk. Let's check in with you all first. How are you all feeling during this time? What's the emotional temperature of the world? How's that landing on you?
I will go. I think I mentioned last time that I was taking the responsibility of my own self-care, and my family and I went camping over the weekend.
Yes, ma'am.
And it was really important because like this was a time when DC is having a whole lot of peaceful protests and things are going on, and they painted the streets with Black Lives Matter. And of course, I would want to be there. But I had to say right now it's like really a time that I need to focus on the Black lives in my home.
Yes.
And we taught the boys how to pitch tents and how to survive in the woods for a couple of days, and it was great.
Let me tell you something. The way this year is going, we all need to learn how to pitch a tent and build a fire and hunt our own food and grow our own food, and just in case these zombies show up, because anything is possible at this point. My God.
Zombies are chapter 7.
Say it again. Say it again, Tiffany.
I said zombies are chapter 7.
Okay, so we might be a little bit ahead of schedule. I don't know. Tiffany, how are you feeling this, sis?
Gratitude, first of all. I'm really grateful to be here with all of you, and thank you for having me, Terésa. It's really awesome to be able to finally work together, like you said. And to be completely honest, I also went camping this weekend to clear my mind because I know we're headed into something new and strange and beautiful, and I'm feeling affirmed. As an activist, you know, I went to Ferguson with one of your former roommates. And for years, we've been saying abolish ICE. For years, we've been saying defund the police. For years, we've been saying there's another way. And it feels good to see the dialogue move from us being radical left-wing nuts to people actually moving in the direction that I didn't know was going to happen in my lifetime. So I'm joyful. My heart is light, and I'm ready.
Yeah. Hopeful. I lean into that at this point because we are seeing a tide turn, and it just seems like every 5 or 6 years we find ourselves saying, "Oh, I didn't know I would be able to see this in my lifetime." Right? A good decade ago, we were championing the newly elected Barack Obama, and we were like, we didn't know we would see this in our lifetime. And it's like, what's next? What's going to happen next? So I concur with those sentiments, Tiffany. Tell you what, Tammy, tell me how you're feeling. What's going on with you?
Well, thanks for inviting me, TDV. Right now, I'm feeling, it's the wave of the stages and the emotions. But right now, I think that a lot of great things as far as the intensity of 2020. A lot of people said if they knew 2020 would be this way, they would have never been so quick to say goodbye to 2019. However, I think 2020 is having its way, and changes that people wanted in 2019 are definitely here, just not in the way in which we anticipated. Mm-hmm. So as far as for me personally, going through the notions, but also trying to capture the moment that this is history. And in teaching, a lot of times, you're waiting for it to happen, but understanding that you're right in the middle of it's happening. And when you understand that it's happening, therefore you can become the subject, and it takes on a different lens. So while it's challenging and yet exhilarating and yet raging and anger and all the emotions, sure, I still think that at this point that we think we would see it, but in the midst of it, it's been happening. We're in the midst of it. And this is the time right now to open your eyes and look outside the window, and not just look outside, but also put your feet to the ground and make sure your mouth and feet are tied together.
Yes, say a word. Make sure your feet are not tied together. Yeah. Aviva, how you feeling today, sis?
I'm doing all right. I think that I also am feeling in this moment more gratitude than I expected to feel, especially for the work that so many of us are doing in various spaces, right? I mean, I think some of the things I found the most encouraging is the myriad ways in which people are finally coming around to seeing how they can sort of function in the movement, in Black Lives Matter and beyond, right? And sort of anti-racism and like sort of on anti-capitalism, and in defunding the police and all of these things that were for a long time, I think, really to the vast majority of people, I think, felt very sort of radical and out of left field, and now are finally coming. I wouldn't say mainstream. This is probably just my circle, but still seem like they're coming into more of a light, certainly, right? And I'm going to also just say really quickly that, you know, I have a young child, and trying to see what's going on through her eyes is really striking too, and is shaping this experience for me in ways that I could never have anticipated. Ironically, or similarly, we actually just set up a tent in our backyard tonight because I thought it was something that we could do just to sort of distract from everything that's been going on. So this seems to be a common theme, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think, you know, I've been through a lot of feelings of sort of anger and outrage, and I'm coming around now to more hope and gratitude, which is nice. So those things will probably go back and forth. But,
yeah. How is this time registering on your daughter? She's 6 now, right?
She's 6. It's interesting because we for a while had not been talking a lot about what was going on, but I'm sure she was experiencing our tension all the time. Like, we were just incredibly sort of upset and tense and sort of talking behind closed doors. And finally, we were just like, this is ridiculous. Like, we need to actually explain to her what's happening and sort of go into more detail. And she's been handling, I mean, she's been resisting watching things that we've tried to show her. So children, of course, like child appropriate things.
Right.
And yet then wants to talk about them later, right? Which is, I think, all you can hope for, right? That she is actually paying attention. She just doesn't want to engage. And I think she's you know, this is for, so because I'm biracial, she is white presenting, right? I mean, I don't think anyone would, you know, she knows that her grandmother is Black and that I'm biracial, but to her, I don't think she registers her race in that way. And so that's an interesting sort of aspect of this too, right? Sort of trying to sort of explain that to her.
Sure. So. Yeah. We see this movement with Sesame Street. Sesame Street has always kind of like had the right touches where world events, you know, come into play. And I noticed that they've been using Elmo but I think that might be a little bit younger than what your daughter's, you know, where she is. But yeah, just all this heart, love, and everything to your family. Kelly, how you feeling?
Hey, everybody. First, I want to say shout out to the Dope Glasses crew, because I realized that there's a bunch of us who have these amazing frames. So I feel like I'm in good company.
Yeah.
So I too, I didn't go camping this weekend, but I went hiking. And it was the first time since mid-March that I had been out of the house anywhere that wasn't the grocery store or walking my dog. And on a separate note, Terésa could tell you about my dog who terrorized her house. Clinton.
Our boy Clinton.
Clinton's a love, though. He's a handful, but he's a love. But it was the first time that I had been out, you know, in the world. And it felt so restorative and affirming. I think there's a whole nother broadcast that could be done about Black folks reclaiming our connection to the woods. Yeah. But it was really just wonderful and something I didn't even realize I needed. I would say that, you know, it's interesting because all of us are joking about how 2020 is the year that needs to go back to where it came from. And when I'm not joking about that, I actually think it's an opportunity for transformation. And I've been thinking a lot about the element of fire, in part because we're watching literal fires take place in different cities. But I also feel like my belly is on fire. I am really energized in this moment. I think it's always been time for us to do this really important work, but now is really the time to do it. And I think people see it in a different way. And I think globally people are seeing it in a way that tells me this is a moment unlike any other in history. And I'm feeling energized to lean into it.
Yeah.
So I'm good and planning for more hikes in the future.
That's the next show. We should really just, insert an episode called Life in the Wilderness. Since there was that episode where Sondra told her parents that she and Elvin were going to open a wilderness store.
Oh,
Seemed appropriate. Yeah. Dr. Smith, tell us how you're doing, and then we'll get to our topic of the night.
Sure. So I am focused and I am ready to get into the work, but I'm not at hopeful yet. I'm not at hopeful. And I don't know if I'm rejuvenated. I just know that I need to do some work. So I'm still dealing with some emotions, but in order to get through those emotions, I'm doing work. But I almost feel like I need to go camping because maybe maybe I just need to get some fresh air. And really just have some of these conversations that I'm having in my mind in this house outside, and get some more rejuvenation based on that. But I'm hopeful, but I also know that I also feel like there's still a lot of work to do. Over the weekend, I watched the Texas Democratic Convention. I signed up to be someone who can register people to vote, so I've just been committed. I'm just trying to figure out how do I connect myself to this movement in a way that uses my gifts or what I can do. And so I've been looking for that way to connect to it in order to be a part of it in a way that's comfortable for me. Yeah. So, but I'm not hopeful yet. I might get there. I'm sure I'll get there. I'm just not there today.
So let's get to the topic at hand, because we could be on that all night, but we want to talk about media, colorism in media, especially when it comes to women representation. And let's start actually with what brings us here with Sondra and her place within the Cosby clan, if you will, the Huxtable clan, I should say, if you will, and then kind of branch out from that. What were some of the thoughts for those of you who watched the Cosby Show in real time, like when it aired and you saw it for the first time on a Thursday night, like what were some of your thoughts when they introduced Sondra, or what has been, your connection to Sondra, if any?
First, I could have sworn they said they only had 4 children.
Okay.
And then Sondra just popped up out of nowhere and everybody just said, oh, there's a 5th. It just kept on going. So I think it's so interesting that in this iteration of Sondra, we see her again demanding space, right, in the family, demanding recognition in that way, because she actually felt like an afterthought for the series.
Yeah.
I definitely think you nailed it in that dialogue, because of just what you just said, Red. She always felt like like Sondra to me didn't really feel significant, sadly, until the introduction of Eldon, because it gave her like a story, it gave her like a character, a thing, right? Like she just was the smart daughter that was away, that presented very intelligently and go along to get along. But like in retrospect, it's kind of sad that a man defined her character to me in my youth. So it was beautiful to hear Claire's reflections because I never thought of Sondra as a best friend and a partner and someone who'd been with her since the beginning of her marriage. And so I'm just thankful for that reflection.
Yeah, thank you for those words. In writing this book and writing the fan fiction for the Cosby Show, I think Sondra grabbed me by the shirt collar, essentially, and said, you just got to give me some backstory or reason for knocking at the door in the first place. And, you know, a lot of times I think in media in general, that's the way Black women in general are utilized, as the sidekick or as the funny friend, or, you know, I was just watching an interview with Amber Riley, and she's talking about the situation with Lea Michele and the whole Glee cast and how Black women were treated on that set during that series. That you know, historically, Dinah Carroll talked about it when she, you know, was on Dynasty. She comes in as this, you know, clearly the show needed someone to represent some people of color, a person of color, a Black person more specifically, and they kind of pushed her to the show. And she, you know, it was well documented that she felt like, you know, a Band-Aid or an afterthought. So, you know, maybe branching out a little bit further temporarily from Sondra, what are some of y'all's thoughts about how Black women are used in television? Viva, let me start with you, since your focus, this is your bread and butter at Arizona State and just in life in general. Like, what is the treatment of Black women when it comes to television, before we even get to colorism?
Sure. I mean, it's a huge question, right? But I mean, I think one of the things that really strikes me is that not always, but often we have one of two things happening, right? Either we have the Black woman character who is introduced as a kind of, you can almost tell that they're like, we need a Black woman, we'll just put her in here, right? And she doesn't necessarily have any kind of backstory or any kind of shape or form. She's just, they thought, well, we need this Black woman character, we're going to put her in here because we need someone to sort of fill this slot. And I think that often happens, again, not always, often happens in ensemble dramas. And many times in those cases, that's the case with most of the characters, right? Maybe except for a couple of them that we
they
get
satisfy an archetype in a sense.
Yeah, they just fit into these slots.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily just Black women. Or we have, you know, I guess there's three, maybe there's probably more than three, but at least three, right? Or we have the sort of Black woman character who has to sort of fit into these, this is actually, I think, more of the archetype, right? Has to fit into this archetype of what we expect, sort of the conventional stereotypical expectations of a Black woman are, right? In terms of, and that can depend on what kind of show it is, right? Whether it's a comedy or a drama, like which versions of those conventions we have, right? Mm-hmm. And then more rarely, but slowly, we are slowly starting to see this, is we have shows where we actually have more than one Black woman. And then you finally get to have characters who have some nuance to them, right? And who are actually like real people. I mean, this is one of the things that I'm always saying to my students when we talk about race in film or TV, that one of the biggest problems is being the only one, because then you're only allowed to be a certain way. And no matter what is happening in that like particular situation, even if it's a positive, like what we want to say is a positive representation, it gets to be the only representation. Yeah. And so the more you have, the more, say, Black women get to be characters, not just in general, like across television, but on many different shows. Mm-hmm. And on the same show. I think that's actually really important. Yeah. Then the more different kinds of like nuanced representations you have.
Yeah. So. Jump in there, Tammy. Tell us what are your thoughts about, you know, Black women and representation in television in a general sense, and we'll come back to Sondra in a little bit.
Oh, we're coming back to Sondra. Okay.
We can go back to Sondra now.
I was just thinking about Sondra. I think Sondra was very conventional. She was non-confrontational. They didn't really give her room to lay out a character. She followed in her mother's footsteps. I mean, she just followed it by the book. And the other children, seems like they had the situations and scenarios that they were able to kind of level out. And Sondra was overlooked as far as her challenges. Whatever they were not presented overall. Mm-hmm. I do believe, though, as women and the roles, you know, this goes back to women in general not being able to vote, women in general always being a sub factor. You can be seen but not heard. Even in these roles, if you want to go into gender and then you couple it with race, which is the colorism, that's more than variables and dynamics that just begin to, I don't know. I think Alice Walker, 1982, termed, colorism. And in that regard, colorism is more gender based. So, when we do look at this gender base, it seems like women are highlighted as it relates to the different shades or the different hues.
Sure.
Even though it seems as if before, I think because they didn't talk, they were seen, there was more visual put on them in this capacity. How it relates to TV, I mean, TV, movies, film. I mean, there's a plethora. I mean, we could go down to Martin. We could go down to Coming to America. She's My Queen to Be. We could go over to Blackish recent, episode that they did, or even Love and Basketball, Jump in the Broom, Just Right. It's always, you can kind of see that they tend to have the darker shade brothers and the lighter shade of women in the colorism as relates to the movie. So I don't want to go into a whole bunch of things, but I still think that Alice Walker was right. It's gender based. And as Alice Walker said, if you're white, you're more likely to be right.
Well, anything when you say, like Alice Walker said, is probably going to be something that's sage and wise and all that. So, Kelly, what are your thoughts on the topic?
Even the color purple.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a couple of different thoughts. First, I'm so glad that you mentioned Diane Carroll, because I actually think that Dominique Devereaux is one of the most interesting characters on TV, and she never gets that credit. And she did the exact same things that Joan Collins did, right? She was like the reverse mirror image of Joan Collins.
Yeah.
And so I think it took a lot of courage and guts to play that character. And I remember watching it when I was in elementary school, way too young to watch that. Just amazed to see this woman so bold.
When
and
she
so
slapped
brash.
old girl,
Whew.
slapped her around the world. You were like, you did that for me, didn't you, Donna?
That's right. And I think about it a lot. I think about that slap a lot, actually. Yeah, I guess I would just say a couple of things that some of the other panelists have brought up, which is that, we see Black women in TV and in movies in these very stereotypical roles. And I think it's not until we actually see Black women as showrunners, right, or in the writer's room, that we start to see these much more nuanced characters of all shades. And there are several that have come up in the last few years, Queen Sugar, Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder, Insecure. So there's all these shows where Black women are in charge and showing the depth and breadth of our experience and colors that I don't think we would get otherwise. The other thing I guess I wanted to say just about Sondra was, I feel like Sondra's the character that reminds me the most also of the class distinctions of the Huxtables, right? You had, Denise, who kind of went wild and sort of did her own thing. Vanessa was smart, but she too was kind of funny and sort of quirky, right? So you have different nuances, but Sondra's the one to me that just really reminds me of Cliff and Clair and the class, like that they are upper middle class. And that she is trying so hard to hold on to that identity. And so for me, Sondra, the colorism conversation about Sondra can't be divorced from class.
Sure. Mo and Velicia, tell us a little bit about what your thoughts were when it came to Sondra's purpose as we explored her during the rehearsal process.
I thought she brought a little bit of balance. I think that you had so many kids that had so many Theo had a lot, of his own issues going on. You had Vanessa, who was kind of on the smart side, but kind of quirky, but she was pretty much it. There was nobody else into academics. There was nobody else really striving. And everybody else was kind of wanting to do the bare minimum. So I thought she brought a little balance to the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I feel exactly the same way. And even in a further point with it with Sondra is, I feel like yes, she came in and yes, I definitely feel like she came in as an afterthought. But I also feel like her role in all of it was, this is what the end product is. If you do Claire and Cliff, if you listen to everything we're doing and you abide by our rules and you abide by the parameters we're trying to provide you, you can also, you too can go to Princeton, just like Sondra. And you too can marry a doctor, just like, I felt like she carried, and even like reading for Sondra, and we discussed it the other day, is you just, you feel so, I felt so bad for her because we never did get to see Sondra. I mean, everybody grew up on that show, and Sondra came fully formed, like learn to love her because she's here now. She's the fifth one. She's been here the whole time. But she wasn't. So we kind of had to take her at what she was, and she really didn't have an arc. I mean, her arc, and as it was said earlier, was highly dependent on Alvin, and it was, you have Sondra, who has done all the right things. She went to the right school. She was kind of a goody two shoes. Never got into trouble. Wasn't, going out and having big fun. She wasn't wearing locks. She wasn't, she was just, she was Sondra. Very milk toasty and just, that was her thing. And, and I think that the introduction of Alvin to give her some sort of spin and give her some sort of conflict, because even when all of her Sondra-ness, she was never having conflicts with Cliff or Claire until Alvin was like, women stink. And then she was like, oh, Alvin. And then, Claire got into it. And that was her conflict. Yeah. It was external.
Vicariously.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It was really different. It was different for her, like everyone else. But like Velicia said, everyone is very aimless. Everyone's getting into trouble and they're messing up, and they got friends from different neighborhoods, and they're tomboys, and they're, getting into this and getting into that and not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And then, she's the anchor of, like, she was almost, I don't want to call her Stepfordish, because that's not where I want to be. That's not where I want to be with her as someone who has played Sondra. That's not who she is. And you can tell that it's almost like it was killing her to be that formulaic.
I get the feeling that Sondra got Cliff and Claire off the hook. Oh, here they had 4 kids that just, and I mentioned it in Denise's piece. I can see Red Summer saying it when we did her episode last week, where she said, here are the 2 most perfect parents with a gang of imperfect kids. And sitcoms are kind of built that way, right? Well, no, actually sitcoms are built the opposite, that the kids are the intelligent ones and the parents are bumbling idiots. And a part of what Bill Cosby pitched to both ABC and NBC was, I don't want to get into that, right? It's well documented that, ABC passed on it because, the parents were too smart and the kids were kind of wayward. And he was like, that's what we're doing. And so the show gets off to the start that it gets off to. And the pilot episode, we see Claire, who does not resemble the Claire we ended up with in the second episode forward. I don't even know if it's clear that she was even a lawyer in the pilot episode, because she wore an apron. She was a bit more homely looking, kind of, like not homely ugly, but like domesticated. There wasn't that sort of refinedness that she was able to bring later. And then midway through the first season or closer to the second season, we're introduced to Sondra, because we'd seen Theo be something of a mess, and we've seen their idea of Denise be something of a mess through their eyes, but we all fell in love with Denise. And of course, the younger 2 were just 2 small, impetuous kids. And so my feeling was Sondra got them off the hook and saying they are good parents and they know how to raise kids, and not everyone in the house are idiots. We can prove this by showing, right? I believe.
Here's our control.
Yeah,
everyone else is the variables.
Dr. Smith, you're
can I add something here? But I also think that she shows the emotional labor of keeping up this kind of middle class, what a middle class person is supposed to look like, or what they're supposed to act like. And nobody is looking at it. She's carrying all of this angst and just like at odds with herself throughout the whole show. And I know you brought it out, but it had to have been there for you to bring out in this fan fiction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she was having, people were passing her by and just like, oh, sorry for your loss, and talk about their book club. You know, like if that it can be an example of how someone is just seen but unseen.
Right. Part of the
that is so problematic in a family that is supposed to be perfect.
Right.
You know, and so when you're looking at like, what is for African American families who reach this level, what kind of emotional labor does that cause for those children, for the parents, you know, but particularly in this episode for Sondra. And then you layer onto it the colorism and the beauty and the fact that she's not a person until she gets married. You know, all of that. So her character was really problematic in a show created by African American people. So what are we saying?
Right.
To ourselves.
100%.
I wanted to give Sondra a little bit of credit here for a second. I don't know if many people paid attention to that. Sondra was like the first Black woman that I saw like denounce Eurocentric education as like the pinnacle of where to be. And she gave that up to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, I could not go to school that I'm supposed to be so honored to get into and do something else. So especially, you know, all of those kids who are artists and their parents want them to go to business school, and kids who are like my sister wanted to do hair, like all of those things that people want to do like in their spirit. Like Sondra just kind of slid that in.
Exactly.
Under the radar.
I think we're speaking our love language where that's concerned. And you know, one of my top 5 favorite episodes is the episode where she and Elvin come in and they're like, yeah, no, we're opening a wilderness store. Now the line of the century was, Sondra, you owe me $32,870.52, and I want my money now. That aside.
Well, just working in the high schools, I noticed that there's a lot more diversity. Like colorism used to be a big deal, you know, but now I don't know if it's because we do have so many, like you said, Issa Rae, you have people who are really diverse skin tones. And so in the high school, and I work in an inner city high school, so we see a lot. But I think my girls, for the most part, are a little more empowered, definitely than I was coming up.
One of the things that, and I watched the Cosby Show actually mostly in reruns as a child. But one of the things that always struck me about Sondra and the other women on the show is that she was under this, and this is also answering your question. But she was the one who was supposed to be like Clair, right? Like she was supposed to sort of fulfill all these obligations of, as other people were saying, other panelists were saying, this sort of like upper middle class, successful Black womanhood, and then trying to navigate how she could push against it. And I, as a child, kind of worried that I was going to be like Sondra, actually, which is really interesting because I wanted to be like Denise, right? Who I felt like was sort of pushing back against the respectability politics of the sort of like upper middle class version of the sort of family and its structures. And so I think one of the ways that we can think about this question too, sort of taking it broader in terms of empowerment, is I think now as an adult, I can see that these are different ways of acting in the world, right? That's sort of different ways of feeling empowered in the world. Whereas as a child, I felt like they were opposing ways, right? That, you know, on the one hand, you had someone like Sondra who was very sort of well-behaved and for the most part, like did what she was told, right? And then only later as an adult is sort of pushing back. And you know, someone like Denise who is, you know, pushing back a lot, right? Like and then also like in the sort of meta universe of the show, also pushing back, right? And is practically written out of the show because the way in which sort of what the actress is doing is is pushing against what Cosby thinks, the show should be, right? And I think that those kind of opposing ways to me now are really interesting to see as ways that we can see this kind of empowerment happening on different levels. So yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go for the deep dive real quick because there's so many layers. And I guess in some regards, it's good to see now that there are many representatives that are coming out in the media who are given that visual sense that it's okay to be of different hue, to be of different colors, that Black is beautiful, to love yourself, that it's all beauty. It has not always been the case. I look at Insecure is one of those shows that's doing that. Even Viola Davis and How to Get Away with Murder, it wasn't until later in her career she experienced a lot of things early on where she couldn't get roles. But it also is, it's one thing that Hollywood necessarily doesn't see beauty as non-Black ancestry in some regards of roles. I remember the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Aunt Viv was changed by two different characters, distinctively different. And the backstory is that, or the undertone was that one was dealing with the colorism of skin tone, was often more accepted in that regard. But I will have to say that this is a global impact. And what I mean by globally is it's just not white and Black. It's just not Black within Black, but this is globally. Colorism, the different shades within the internal of a race. There's colorism. There's colorism from one race to another. There's colorism. It's like wanting to be something lighter because slavery said, depending upon what job that you had, depending upon what shade you were. After slavery, receiving education, memberships, fraternities and sororities, church, political affiliations. These things were based at the very basic representation and membership that also assert class. And so when we think about coming out of it, this is still some of the foundation and it's still breathing. The deep dive would be maybe we don't see it as much, but I think it's still somewhat ingrained. Even when creamy crack made it I should say relaxer, or this huge business of weave. Get your what is, I don't even know, the Indian, the 24-inch, the 36-inch, the straight. I hate to say it, but that is somewhat of the traditional beliefs that go back to says if my hair is straight, then it's going to be more so acceptable or light. And if my skin is light, it's more so acceptable because in slavery, master gave privileges, and privileges have always been given based upon these particulars. Sure. So I think we're dealing with race within race, media within media, but also internally race, because I want that girl that looked like maybe not as Black, but more so something global or biracial, which is a mix of the best of the two. And so the brothers or the guys will go after, and I think that it's very complex and complicated, but I also believe that it's about mental health. Mental health is unacknowledged and unaddressed in this situation, and negative emotional impact does not discriminate, and it's amongst all hues, shades, and colors.
It's interesting. During the civil rights movement in particular, the Black arts movement in particular, we saw a reversal of what was deemed as acceptable or privilege, if you will, when it comes to light-skinned sisters being permitted into social movements. You think of people like Kathleen Cleaver or Diane Nash, who are light-skinned sisters who constantly had to prove their Blackness because they were lighter complected. Yeah. Are we seeing still some of that today? I mean, what is privilege among Black women when it comes to colorism?
I just want to share one personal. I was in 8th grade, and based upon class, this was based on class and color. A girl told me, you know what? I don't like Black people. Sitting right in front of me at breakfast, lunch, because she was mad at another student who was Black. And said, I don't like Black people. And I looked because supposedly I thought this was a friend. And she says, but I don't mean that to you, Tammy. You're not black. You're brown.
Mm-hmm.
And I never forgot that. Because what she was asserting was not just skin hue or tone, but also class, right? Socioeconomic, which oftentimes you're not black enough because of social economic, you don't live in certain areas. You know, this thing is very detailed. And when you talk about privilege, I think privilege is not just white privilege.
Mm-hmm.
There's socioeconomic privilege. There are Black people who are privileged amongst other Blacks. You know, there are levels to this, if you will.
What you got percolating over there, Kelly?
Well, there's so much richness in this conversation. I mean, I guess I agree with Tammy in the sense that we have to understand that anti-Blackness is global, but none of this is possible without the histories of white supremacy and colonialism, right? And so, and to that extent, it applies everywhere. You know, if you have traveled to Asia or even seen advertisement in different parts of Asia, you will see skin lightening creams, right? So this is, it is absolutely a global issue. I guess I was thinking also about this conversation for me can't be divorced from social media and the impact that social media has had on us in terms of representation. And partially it's, you know, you mentioned I'm working on a book based on my dissertation research, which was about how Black women use social media to tell the stories about our lives, you know, of gender and race. And one of the things that always stands out for me is one person that I interviewed in that research said to me that social media for her gave her all of these different representations of what Black girls and women could be that she had never seen anywhere else. So, you know, it was from social media that she realized Black women could be into rock or anime or all of these different things that maybe stereotypically we aren't, you know, supposed to like. And so I think that part of what's happening now and the widening of representation is actually because we're making it, right? Yeah. Issa Rae started her show on YouTube, right? Mm-hmm. Awkward Black Girl. So there's ways that we are, we're doing it for ourselves, you know, based on the fact that we have access to this platform that gives us much more permission and access to be all of the ways that we are naturally. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that we can't, it's not like Hollywood has just decided to open the doors, right? We've pushed the doors open through the vehicles and platforms that we've had.
Yeah. Just speaking of that privilege, what responsibility do we have as creatives to spread the wealth or the love there?
I kind of battle with this at my current school, where this is the first time that I've taught at a school that was very diverse, like racially. And because I show up in the room and I'm like, black, 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 and I'm just like, all right, everybody, y'all gonna learn about a side of the day. Let me tell you what happened with the FBI did and COINTELPRO and the white children are like, oh my gosh, like I don't understand what we're learning. I don't know why we have to do this. And then they answer questions that are very in line with what they're taught about society and themselves. And then I have to go back and I have to undo a lot of these conversations. And, you know, it's a whole lot of work that we're doing in spaces. And I was like emotionally like spent one day. And I just had to tell my Black girls in the class, like, this doesn't work unless you agree that you are inferior. Like white supremacy depends on our participation. Mm-hmm. And like when we sat down and kind of talked about like, how do they have the ideas about themselves? And we have a pretty diverse class where, you know, we're saying like, well, I'm a Latina, but I'm a dark Latina. And the women in my family always tease me about, you know, this or, you know, just all of the conversations that came up around it. Like, I don't know, like sometimes it feels like this wheel that as soon as you think you've gotten to the pinnacle, like it swings back around on you, because then you unearth this other thing, this other part of it. Mm-hmm. And really feeling like I am either good or bad inherently because of something that I did not do. I cannot choose or control. That just by virtue of the tone of my skin determines whether even I deserve a pause in my humanity.
Mm.
Wow.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's our show for today. Yeah, dog it. Wow. All right, so we're going to finish with our infamous mainstay question: who is your favorite Huxtable, and which one would you most like? Tammy, who is your favorite Huxtable, and which one were you most like?
This is a crazy, crazy question because, depending upon what episode, what season, what year, it could change. But if I had to guess, actually, Laura kind of said something earlier as to what I was thinking about this. I think my favorite Huxtable was, of course, Clair Huxtable. She was bad. She was bad. Like, you could always depend upon her to be right there in the middle of it, and yet still hold her class and her gracefulness. The one I think that I most like is probably Denise. But I also love Denise because without Denise, we wouldn't have a different world. And I thought it was interesting that they took her character in order to split that, and that took a whole nother level where it set a platform for people to want to go to college, to be exposed to college, to HBCU culture, just in general. Mm-hmm. And I love Denise and her character for that level.
Yeah. Aviva?
Well, yeah, I mean, a Different World was my show. Like, that was I liked the Cosby Show too, but A Different World was the show that I really gravitated towards. But, I mean, I'm really torn because I think I really, in terms of favorite character, it's a toss-up, and they're very, very different characters between Clair, actually, as well, and Denise. I just loved how Clair she was so put together and confident and sort of forceful in her beliefs. And then I just, especially as a sort of child, teenager watching the show, really admired Denise's sort of the pushback she gave. I think in terms of the character I was most like, it's actually probably Vanessa, which I hadn't actually ever thought about before until you asked that question. But she immediately leaps to my mind as even though I wasn't really that interested in her character, that she's probably who I was. So.
Sure. Kelly, tell us which was your favorite Huxtable, and which Huxtable were you most like?
I think I'm going to throw a wrinkle in here. I actually really liked Olivia.
Yeah.
Olivia reminds me of how I was as a young child, just kind of speaking whatever comes to your mind and challenging adults and sort of being precocious and probably a little bit too, what adults would say, too grown for your own good. I think, though, what's interesting is that as an adult for a large part of my 20s and 30s, I think I am most like Sondra. And so that's the beauty and pain of this particular chapter of your work for me, is how I realize how much Sondra and myself really tried to please people around her and her family. And so if you're not in your 40s yet, trust me, 40s are glorious because you give all of that up and really come into yourself. So I would say Olivia and Sondra.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Yeah. Velicia.
I answered it in the comments a few episodes ago, but I'm going to stick with my favorite, and the one that I'm most like are the same, and it's Vanessa. Prior to Sondra's debut, Vanessa was the middle of three girls, and I was the middle of three girls. And so growing up, I definitely identified with her. And even towards the latter years, looking at your work right now, kind of the push against the grain, want to do my own thing, but ultimately will kind of come back to the middle. So Vanessa and Vanessa.
Vanessa and Vanessa. Yeah. What are you thinking, Tiffany?
Definitely. I was Vanessa 100%. She was my favorite character. I even got that flat top haircut. I started it myself, so it forced my mom to let me go ahead through with it because I had already shaved up the back of my head. And then I would say in adulthood, I'm totally Denise. Like, I was supposed to be a lawyer, and I was probably supposed to take a life a lot more seriously in the sense of like, I didn't get married till I was almost 40. I do not and will not be having children. And I live a very, free lifestyle. And so I think I ended up growing up to be Denise, but in my childhood, I was Vanessa.
Yeah. It's interesting how much like playing spades this question is, because everybody's like, okay, so my favorite, and then and it's just sort of kind of like holding this answer close to your chest as if you're protecting something, which I think speaks to the endearing nature of these characters. That was some of the joy I took in writing this book, is that it allowed me to live vicariously through all of the characters and explore what felt familiar in all of them in my life. And so it's interesting here how you say, when I was younger, I felt more like this, but then as I grew up, my kind of view of the world evolved more to be more aligned with this other character. We have another show on Thursday, and I will start the trigger warnings now, because it is one that we feel like it's probably the toughest of all the shows, episodes that we're going to be doing. And without giving too much away before Thursday, we will be presenting Chapter 5, Vanessa. We know that a lot of people choose Vanessa for various reasons as their favorite Huxtable or the Huxtable they were most like. As Darnell said in the premiere episode, he loved Vanessa because she felt like she needed some love. And we want all of you to tune in on Thursday, because Vanessa will need all of our love on Thursday.
That movie is great. That's the second time.
It's life, and it's about addressing the full complexities of life. So thank you all for coming tonight. Join us again on Thursday at 8:00 Eastern, in all the time zones, and we'll see you then. All right, good night.